As you all know, he's an author, he's a director, he's an executive producer, he's a creative genius, and we just love being here at Little Shop of Stories that we get the opportunity to have wonderful authors like this in the shop, and thank you guys for all coming to join us here. I'm a DJ MacHale fan. I came to the party late and picked up Morpheus Road, The Light, and thought that I'd learn a new book for the store, and it scared my pants off, and everyone who comes in the store that I try to sell it to, I'm like, you want a scary book, this is for you. So good and action-packed and the right kind of scary. So without further ado, welcome DJ MacHale.
Thank you, and I always have to say thank you to every parent here who was dragged here tonight. To say, it's like, I'm going to go see an author. You want to know what? It's a school night. Like, so thank you very much, parents, for coming out here tonight. Now, somebody drove here from a long way.
That was me.
How many hours did you drive?
9 hours. I'm from Baton Rouge, Louisiana.
That's pretty awesome. That's it for that. Good night, everybody. Thanks for making the drive. Well, everybody say there's some seats up front, guys. Come on, come. There's plenty of room up here. Come sit. Come up here. And everybody hates to sit in the front row, so I like look at them and like maybe answer questions and stuff. Well, for those of you who don't know, my name is DJ MacHale. Come on in, sit down. And I recognize some faces from school today. Who's from school today? Remember you? You're at school today? Awesome. Excellent. I'll get it. And as you heard, I'm an author. And do we have any Pendragon readers here? Now, and I have to ask this question, not because I'd like to hear the people who've read my books, but because it depends on what I'm going to read tonight. How many of you guys have already read The Light?
Yes.
All right. That's a number of you, okay. The reason I asked that question is because what we're going to do tonight, I'm going to talk for a little bit. I'm not going to be, I know it is a school night, so I'm not going to talk forever and blah, 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 blah. But I'll talk for a little bit. And then I'm going to do a reading, and I have to decide on what reading I want to do. The reading I did at school today was from The Light. And it was one of the earlier scenes. So I can either do another scene from The Light, or what I like to do, but it requires giving away a spoiler, is read a scene from The Black. So we'll talk about it. If anybody's really against that, we'll talk about it. I'm not going to do it for a while. But, okay. Morpheus Road. For those of you, maybe some of you older guys might know, I used to do a TV show called Are You Afraid of the Dark? And this is actually cool, and I didn't obviously I didn't plan this until I just got to this room right now, but for those of you who don't know, Are You Afraid of the Dark was a show on Nickelodeon. It ran from 1992 to 2000. It's still running somewhere in the world. And it was a scary show. Talk about scaring the pants off. I scared the pants off the kids all over the world for about 10 years, and we made games and books and all that kind of stuff. Because I love scary stories. And normally I don't say this, but you'll see why I do. I say this in a second. But when I first pitched the show to Nickelodeon, the title was Scary Tales. Makes sense. They're scary. They're tales. It's fine. And so the Nickelodeon wanted to do it, but they said, we don't like the title. Can you come up with more of a Nickelodeon title? Fine. So I thought back to some of the reasons, like some of the earlier things that I saw that scared me when I was a kid and whatnot. One of the earliest memories I have of literature was a story my mother used to read to me. And it's from that book. It's on that wall right back there. Oh boy. Now, I remember the Sneetches, but that book actually had 4 stories in it. The 4th story was a short story called What Was I Scared Of? Does anybody remember that? And it was a story about this little Dr. Seuss character. Well, I don't know what he was in real life, but in the book he was and he was afraid of a pair of pale green pants with nothing inside them. And he was always wearing this pair of pale green pants that would always be chasing him. And I can still hear my mother reading that story to me. It was a scary story, and I loved it. And I think that kind of began my early love of scary things. But the title was What Was I Scared Of? So when I had to go back and change that Nickelodeon title, I'm thinking, well, what was I scared of? Well, this is a scary thing. What was I scared of? Well, I was afraid of clowns. Can't call it the Scary Clown Show. That would be creepy. It would be scary. So it's like, what was I afraid of? What was I afraid of? I was afraid of the dark. Afraid of the dark. Are you afraid of the dark? So the title, Are You Afraid of the Dark, roundaboutly came from that book. What Was I, the Sneetches and other stories from one of the other stories called What Was I Scared of? So anyway, starting with that story, I love scary stories, and I don't like horror stories. I don't like stories where there's like chainsaws involved and like cutting and spurting and stabbing. That doesn't send me. That's just geeky. It's not scary. It's geeky. But the thing, I do like ghost stories, and one of the reasons I like ghost stories, and I wrote about this in the foreword to the Black actually, is because there's always a mystery involved. The ghost, whatever the ghost is, whether it's a good ghost or a bad ghost, they're always up to something. And it's up to the living people to figure out what it is that they're up to. With The Light, there are two very big mysteries that go through the story. For those of you who haven't read it, it's the story about two friends, Marshall and Cooper, two 16-year-old guys. Marshall is this kind of nerd guy who likes to, he's an artist, he's a cartoon artist. And one of the characters he creates is this guy right, wrong book. Anybody have the hardcover of a, yeah, that's not it. Well, there we go, thank you. Visual aid, perfect. I actually left my two books at school today. So if somebody wants to pick up a free Morpheus Row, they're sitting at your school. I left them on the shelf with all my notes for reading and stuff like that. Anyway, so he creates this character called Gravedigger, who is this kind of skeletal, spooky guy who, and this is it's a graphic novel that he wants to write. Now Marsh is kind of a nerd, and he has trepidation about doing everything, and he really doesn't want to grow up, and he likes to do all the kid stuff, as opposed to his friend Cooper, who is just like, woo, let's go, let's party. He's like always getting in trouble, and Cooper is always trying to get Marsh to get out of his comfort zone and do something interesting, and Marsh is always trying to get Cooper to kind of relax and don't get in trouble. So that's the dynamic between these two guys. Well, the whole story takes place over 1 week. It's the first week of summer vacation, and they're ready to go and have a great time. Marshall's mom died a few years before, so it's just Marshall and his dad. And Marshall's dad goes away on business for a week. I'll talk about that in a second too. So Marshall's like, yeah, I got the whole week, this is great. And Marshall's a really responsible guy. You know, he says to his dad, like, don't worry, Dad, I won't have a party while you're gone. And his dad's like, oh, have a party, come on, you know, do something. He's such a nerd all the time. Of course, Coop is like, let's have a party. So Marshall's all set, he's ready to go, but then Cooper gets in trouble. He gets in trouble with the police. He ends up having to go away to live at his family's house. It's about 3 hours away from where they live. So it goes from Marsh, ready for the summer of his life, to being all alone. And the one thing you don't want to be in a ghost story is alone. Because strange things start happening to Marsh early on. And first, it's small at first, it's just kind of spooky things he hears, things he sees, all things that can be explained away. But soon they start getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And what he realizes is that he's being haunted by Gravedigger, the character that he created. It's like Gravedigger has come to life, which is impossible, which is the mystery. It's like, how can this thing be? Is it in his head? Is he going crazy? Is this thing actually real? So that's the big mystery that goes through The Light. The other mystery is he goes up to find Cooper to say, Cooper, I need your help, because I'm alone down there. He goes to find Cooper, and Cooper has disappeared. So that's the other mystery of the story, is trying to find out what happened to Cooper. Now, so those are the two mysteries that go through the first Morpheus Road book, and I love stories like that. But there's something I don't like about ghost stories. And it's, in some way, shape, or form, it happens in all ghost stories, and I'm just as guilty of doing it as the next guy. And that is, now, think about this. Think of all the ghost stories you've seen. The ghost is always up to something, right? And the ghost always leaves clues. Like maybe it's just like something that's written on the wall in blood, like red rum, you know, it's written on the wall. Or they hear a voice saying, you know, Sneetch, whatever it happens to be, there's always some kind of mysterious thing the ghost says that the readers or the living people have to say, what does it mean? Have to figure it out. And I hate that. Because it's like, okay, if the ghost is able to write red rum on the wall, why can't the ghost just write, Dear Bill, the murderer is Sam. He killed me last week. And the antidote you're looking for is in the fridge behind the tomatoes. And, oh, by the way, I forgot to pick up my dry cleaning. Would you please go pick it up? And, by the way, being dead's not so bad. See ya, eventually. Bill. We'll do questions in a little bit, okay? So you know, and the reason they can't do that is because if they could do that, there'd be no story. Because all the things, oh, that's the killer, okay, fine, that's what it is. So authors and writers and filmmakers, they always put in these clues that limits what the ghosts can do to serve the plot. And believe me, I do it all the time. With Are You Afraid of the Dark, I've done it all the time. With The Light, I do it all the time. So one of the things I wanted to do with Morpheus Road in general was to kind of deconstruct and talk about the very nature of ghostly things altogether. So the Morpheus Road is actually the road, in my mind, the road between the living and the dead. The road we all have to walk eventually. The light, not the book, the place, is where we live. We live in the light, the living in the light. And I just did that to be ironic, because they would say, go into the light. Well, my light is here. We live in the light. The black is the first place that spirits go after they leave the body. And most of the story takes place in the black. Now, the black is a cool place because there are spirits there from all times, all places, from throughout history. So our adventure in the black, so what starts with as a kind of small spooky ghost story about these guys being haunted, there's a big twist at the end of this book, and that's what we're going to talk about in a second. So it's a small spooky ghost story kind of evolves into this more of this fantasy adventure as they go into the black, as we see a ghost story from the ghost's point of view. And it starts to explore how ghosts can do things and not do other things. So I kind of answer those questions. It's like, why didn't he write the thing? This is what happened to me, and then pick up the dry cleaning. I answer, and I talk about what it's like to be a ghost and how you can and cannot do things in this book. Now, we're about to reach an impasse. In order for me to go further about this, I'm going to have to give away a little bit of a spoiler about this. For those of you who have read this book, I'll speak in code now. The spoiler being the setup for this book, frankly. The last chapter of this book is written from a different point of view. No, I'm sorry, the last chapter of this book is written from a different point of view, if you remember the book. And this whole book is written from that point of view. So in order to do the, okay, I'll tell you what's going on. It won't hurt the story. It'll only hurt one of the mysteries. Because frankly, there's so much more going on here than what I'm going to say. Marshall and Cooper. Big mystery of what happened to Cooper. Cooper's dead. Cooper died. And we don't find that out till the end of this book. I mean, we kind of start to figure it out as the story's going on. And in fact, the last person to figure it out is Marshall, because he's the last one. He's the last one to give up the ghost, so to speak. But that's what happens at the end of this book. So this book is from Marshall's point of view. I write it kind of like Bobby Pendragon, where he's, with journals, Marshall is telling the story. Not in journal form, but he's telling us the story. It's in first person from Marshall. The last chapter of this book, The Light, flips into Cooper's point of view. This book is from Cooper's point of view, and what happens to him after he died. So what I want to read for you guys tonight is to give you a little example. One of the fun things that I do in these two books is that as we look back, now that we realize that, oh my gosh, Cooper was dead, we look back on The Light, the story of The Light, and we realize, oh, in a lot of these scenes where Marshall was being haunted, Cooper was there too. But he didn't know it because Cooper was a spirit. In the black, we see a number of those scenes. The way they played out in The Light, we see them from Cooper's point of view. So there's a number of similar scenes in the black that they're reprises of scenes from The Light, and we see what Cooper did when he was involved in that scene. So it's a ghost story from the ghost point of view. Now, even though I gave that spoiler away, there's so much more that's going on. It's the big story is about the bad guy. What's the point of the whole thing? It grows to astronomical, incredible, life-changing things. But the kind of fun thing about it, because I like ghost stories, I'm taking a chance to write a ghost story from the ghost point of view. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to read two scenes. I'll give you an example of how this works.